Good morning to you. Thank you so much for keeping us company here this morning on this Sunday, August 1st, Boris.
Christy, autumn is on the horizon. It is unbelievable
I'm looking
how
at
quickly
it. It's in my, I'm looking at it. Oh. I know. So listen, we do want to begin with this new month and new numbers of COVID cases that really we haven't seen in months.
Yeah, and it's this more contagious Delta variant that is erasing some of the progress that was made earlier this year in the United States. The month of July ending with a daily rate of infections across the country almost 7 times what it was in late June. Hospitalizations and deaths also rising sharply. But it seems like people are paying attention. After weeks of dwindling numbers, the rate of vaccination is back on the rise, especially across southern states where vaccination rates have lagged behind the rest of the country. And more cities and states are now reinstituting mask mandates, though politics could disrupt those efforts.
Now, Florida, for instance, is emerging as one of the hardest hit states in this new wave, approaching a record high number of daily COVID-19 cases. Students are returning to school in the coming weeks as well. The number of new cases in children old enough to be vaccinated is at 22%, and the state's governor, Ron DeSantis, is going after communities implementing safety measures, threatening to cut state funding from any schools that compel students to mask up.
This governor has become a champion for people who don't want to wear masks and don't want to follow the CDC. That's who he is feeding dogma and ideology to. He should be screaming for people to get vaccinated. He should be urging them to wear masks. He's like the Pied Piper, just leading everybody off a cliff right now.
Let's go to CNN's Polo Sandoval now. Polo, the politics aside, the data here is clear, and it reinforces what we're hearing from experts that the most effective way to protect yourself and your loved ones is simply to get vaccinated.
Yeah, good morning, Christy. And hey, Boris, where you are in Washington, D.C., as you know, and as you've probably seen, the nation's capital, one of the latest major cities to bring back those mask mandates, now requiring anybody over the age of 2, regardless of their vaccination status, to wear a mask once again indoors. Here in New York City, in fact, Mayor Bill de Blasio expected to make a potential announcement as early as tomorrow regarding masks as well. This happening as not only are vaccination numbers on the rise here in New York State, but also the number of positive COVID tests as well. With COVID cases on the rise across the country, the latest figures from the CDC reinforce the importance of getting vaccinated. New data shows that less than 0.004% of people who have gotten the vaccine have experienced a breakthrough case severe enough to warrant hospitalization, and less than 0.001% of them have died from the disease.
The news is just phenomenal with these vaccines. Even with the super aggressive Delta variant, our vaccines work, and they work really well.
Right now, 97% of the people in the hospital with COVID and nearly all the COVID deaths being reported are among the unvaccinated. The past 3 weeks have seen more people getting vaccines, especially in states that have been lagging the most. Experts are pushing to get people to take the shots. One Georgia county even offering $50 debit cards to those getting vaccinated on Saturday. And it seemed to help.
I've always thought, well, really, they need to offer me some kind of incentive, to go get the vaccine. Say the money is what got me here, just bottom line.
But other people say they simply don't trust the shot or the government offering it to them. And that is medical experts and political officials looking for ways to bridge the confidence gap.
Millions of folks are just a couple of questions being answered away from being vaccinated. And that's ultimately the answer to this pandemic, is getting as many people vaccinated as we possibly can.
You have to give people hope. We're not going to throw up our hands and concede defeat to this deadly virus. It's one arm, one shot, one life. And we just got to keep pumping and grinding till we reach herd immunity.
The fiancée of one Nevada man who waited too long to get the shot to ensure there were no dangerous side effects is urging everyone to stop hesitating and do it now, before it's too late.
Everybody can have a bad reaction to any vaccine throughout history. But I would take a bad reaction to the vaccine over having to bury my husband. I would take that any day.
And once again, you're beginning to hear many of those heartbreaking stories as well throughout parts of the country. Very similar stories to what we saw during the latest wave here in the wintertime. But again, we cannot say it enough. Florida is certainly a big concern here for parents, as test positivity for those from 12 to 19 years old up to 22% right now. This is, as you mentioned a little while ago too, Christy and Boris, Governor DeSantis issuing that executive order banning the implementation of any kind of mask mandate by local governments. We should mention, though, it is not an all-out ban, but nonetheless, certainly a big, leading to a big debate.
No doubt. Polo Sandoval, thank you so much, Polo. Really appreciate it. Dr. Saju Matthew with us now. He's a primary care physician and public health specialist. Saju, it's so good to see you. So one of the other things that we're hearing a lot about is that younger people are getting sick. Help us understand what younger means. Are we talking people in their 40s? Are we talking about teenagers? Can you give us some scope on that?
Yeah, good morning, Christy. I think all of those age groups that you mentioned would be categorized in that younger group. I was talking to an ER doc last night. I'm on a group chat with 3 or 4 ER physicians in the city, and they're telling me that the average age, depending on the ER, is 45, 40 years old. You're having teenagers come in that are sick, short of breath. You're getting more ICU admissions of the younger populations that we didn't see a month or 2 months ago. And you know, Christy, what really worries me is if we don't ramp up these vaccines, there could be a time when the vaccines don't work at all, and that's called vaccine evasion. Can you imagine if the Delta variant combined with the Alpha variant, the Beta variant in South Africa, there's some UK analysis that is predicting that there will be a time absolutely when these vaccines won't work. So this is the time now to get the vaccine so you can prevent dying and being hospitalized.
So are you saying people who have the vaccine now, obviously, are you saying the vaccine is only good for a certain period of time? We've talked about booster shots, but when you talk about further mutations, I'm not sure that people really understand what you mean. Does it mean that the vaccine we have now will be obsolete?
So the vaccines that we have right now work extremely well to prevent you from falling sick and from dying. Almost close to 0% chance of that happening if you get the vaccine that we have now. And that is because we always have to talk about the vaccines with respect to the current variant that's dominant. So the Delta variant compared to the Alpha variant, Christy, has already dropped the efficacy of the vaccine by 10%. So what I'm saying is, if we don't have enough people getting vaccinated in the next few weeks, in the next few months, remember, this virus is a very dangerous virus. It is already mutating, and it can form another dangerous variant in the next 4 weeks. And guess what might happen? If that is more contagious than Delta, then the vaccine drops even more with the efficacy. So get the vaccine now so we prevent these dangerous variants from developing.
So that's the point. The variant, if you get vaccinated, that prevents future mutations. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
If you prevent that's right, Christy. If you prevent the transmission of the virus going from one person to another, there's not going to be any mutation that can form. You're closing the door.
You have said that this is a national security issue, that the White House has to look at its legal options for federally mandating, mitigating, factors like masking and whatnot. I'm wondering how you think that would work in this sense. There are so many people that probably feel like they're being preached at. There are medical experts who I'm sure are exhausted of trying to tell people how important this is, even with the proof that this works and that the vaccines are helping so much. What makes you believe people will listen to a mandate as opposed to something else?
Well, Christy, we've tried everything else. We've given free beer, we've given free scholarship. Right here, we're actually even paying people to get the vaccine, $50, $100. If that doesn't work, how long are we going to wait? How many more people should die unnecessarily? I mean, before the vaccines, remember, Christy, people were relying solely on masks, which, by the way, work effectively to prevent the transmission of this virus. Now that we have the ammunition, People are still not getting the vaccine. We're talking possibly millions could die, especially the scenario that I just painted about this super variant developing. And we're talking about millions of people dying. That's a national security issue. And the reason that I mentioned a federal mandate, which I know in America, I'm not a lawyer, it may not fly, is that if you leave it up to each state and each county, you get a patchwork of these type of recommendations and guidelines. And we know that from last summer and the winter, that never really worked. So I think that it's really important for President Biden to look at the options of a federal mandate to encourage people. We're not forcing this vaccine, but we have to, if you mandate the vaccine, Christy, people will get the vaccine. A larger population will get it.
Dr. Sajid Matthew, we appreciate all the work you do. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. Have a good day.
You bet.
Ahead this hour, out of time. The moratorium on evictions has expired with no relief in sight. What that means for millions of Americans and the reaction on Capitol Hill.
Also, Simone Biles, well, she's seeing her Olympic dreams slip away. She has dropped out of yet another event in Tokyo. We'll tell you what we know.
We are 16 minutes past the hour, and it is the first of the month. So the rent is due, but millions of Americans who can't pay are facing possible eviction.
Yeah, a federal ban on evictions expired at midnight last night after Congress failed to extend the moratorium. Now, Missouri Congresswoman Cori Bush slept outside the Capitol steps Friday night to draw attention to the crisis that's affecting millions of these families.
I'm dirty, I'm sticky, I'm sweaty. I still have on what I had on last night. This is how people will have to live if we don't do something. 7 million people, 6 million, 11 million, how many ever it is, they deserve their human dignity, and they deserve for the people that are paid to represent them to show up and do the work to make sure that they have their basic needs met. What is there to talk about or negotiate about or even have a disagreement about when we're talking about humans that will sleep on the street? That there is no discussion. We're talking about saving lives, and how can we not stand up for those folks, our most vulnerable in our communities, those that are looking to us? Because when we signed up to be in Congress, we said that we would serve and we would represent every single person in our district, regardless of their socioeconomic status, regardless of if they live in a home or not. Let me say this too. At the end of the day, the job is to serve. And so let's serve. And I don't care. It doesn't matter if we think who should have money and who shouldn't. The money is there. There's $40 billion right now that's still on the table that has not been spent.
Millions of people are wondering that very same thing. They're also wondering, what do they do next if they face the possibility of eviction? We're talking to someone next hour who has that very fear, living with it right now because she is at risk of losing her home. We're going to talk to her and hear her story. The other question out of all of this that people are asking is, who's to blame for not extending the moratorium on evictions? And that depends on who you ask.
Yeah, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says that lawmakers simply ran out of time, and she's also pointing the finger at Republicans. Let's get out live to Capitol Hill, and CNN congressional reporter Daniela Diaz joining us now. Daniela, Pelosi's on the offensive here. I think one of the questions for her is whether she thought Democrats had the votes to get something passed. And of course, what happens now?
Right. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is blaming Democrats. In a tweet yesterday, she said, in an act of pure cruelty, Republicans blocked this measure, leaving children and families out on the streets. This was part of a tweet thread addressing the fact that this eviction moratorium is ended last night at midnight. But the real problem is Democrats didn't even have the votes to pass this on their own. These House Democratic leaders were scrambling Friday, the day before they leave for a 7-week recess to try to pass a bill to extend this eviction moratorium. And in the end, some moderate House Democrats left. They went on their recess before the votes could happen. And Republicans did block the measure, but that is because House Democrats didn't have the votes. But this all comes, of course, because the Supreme Court ruled last month that the CDC order could stay in place. This extension of the eviction moratorium could stay in place until July 31st, but then it had to be Congress who acted to extend this. And, you know, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said in a letter yesterday that the House is on call to try to pass a bill on this. But really, the bigger problem is even if the House passes a bill to extend the eviction moratorium, the Senate probably won't be able to pass a bill. Senate Democrats can't really beat the 60-vote threshold needed to break the filibuster to pass this bill. So lots of problems here, and it's unclear where this stands. But House Speaker Nancy Pelosi did say in a tweet yesterday that the White House and House Democratic leaders are urging state and local governments to disperse that $46.5 billion in emergency rental assistance so that families can stay in their homes.
So the other big story I know, Danielle, we're following on Capitol Hill is this $1 trillion infrastructure bill. What do we know about the status there?
Well, we're in a holding pattern, Christy, because the text has not been finalized yet on this bill. And until that text is done, that's when the Senate can actually vote to and proceed with trying to pass this bipartisan infrastructure proposal. You know, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer updated the Senate floor a couple times yesterday in a rare Senate session, saying that they are working on the text, that staffers are working very hard to finalize this text, and we're expecting for it to be done today. But, you know, the Senate isn't in session until later. So we'll wait and see.
We know you'll keep an eye on it for us. Daniela Diaz reporting from Capitol Hill. Thank you so much. Let's dig deeper now and talk all things political with Daniel Lippman, a White House reporter for Politico. Daniel, good morning. We appreciate you spending some time with us this Sunday morning. Let's start with this federal ban on evictions that expired at midnight. As you heard there from Daniela, the blame game has started. So in your eyes, who's ultimately responsible for this lapse? I mean, this was on the calendar. Everybody sort of knew that it was coming. And I also wonder if there are any real political ramifications for this.
Well, it feels like both the White House and congressional Democrats are to blame for this, because it's hard for Pelosi's argument that, hey, the White House only told us about this earlier this week is credible, given that she could have been reading the news and the Supreme Court ruling was not exactly secret. And so they should have been in much better touch in terms of deciding on a strategy to go forward instead of letting millions of people potentially get evicted starting today.
I also want to touch on infrastructure. The Senate reconvening at noon to work on that bipartisan bill, still not finalized. How do you see it playing out? What are you going to be watching for today to give you an indication of how soon this might get a vote?
Well, I'm going to be just watching to see how many Republicans actually vote for it and what they actually say about it. Are they going to, is this going to be a ticket for Democrats to have a much better chance of success keeping the House and the Senate next year, because they can say, we did something bipartisan? One White House official has told me that, you know, this is kind of an indication of that America can accomplish things and not get, you know, mired in internal rivalries. And so we can show dictatorships like China, hey, this is something that we can do, both Democrats and Republicans, and not, you know, and we can prove to the world that American democracy is still strong.
Yeah, that's a priority for this White House, right? Not just actually getting money to fix roads and bridges, but also to fulfill President Joe Biden's promise that he can work together with Republicans to actually pass laws. Let's pivot now to the January 6th committee. Members have said that everything is going to be on the table for the next stage of their investigation, including subpoenas for some of their Republican colleagues, including Mo Brooks, Jim Jordan, even potentially House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. What would you realistically expect to happen if these members are called to testify?
Well, I think they're going to try to evade such subpoenas because they don't want to be in the position of disclosing what they consider are private conversations with the White House and with President Trump, former President Trump, about what happened on January 6th and what kind of candid conversations McCarthy was telling Trump in terms of, hey, you should stop these people, given that McCarthy's message, and other Republicans have pivoted back to, well, this is Speaker Pelosi's fault. Why didn't she handle the security properly? If they're making that argument, then why aren't they talking about Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who was the majority leader there then and should have been eyeing the store as well then?
Yeah, I think just given the way that some, like Jim Jordan, have had a difficult time answering questions regarding his conversations with Donald Trump on January 6th, he likely does not want to sit in front of that committee to testify. Daniel Littman, as always, thanks so much for the time.
Thank you.
Of course. So here is a question for you. What do goats eat? Goats, of course, as in the greatest of all time. That's the big question out of Tokyo, isn't it, Coy? You got a chance to sit down with swimmer Katie Ledecky, right?
Yes, she is a bad woman. And I sat down with my fellow Stanford grad, Boris, and we talked about her medal haul here in Tokyo. And yes, what she ate for that celebratory meal. It's all coming up right here after the break.
Team USA has been flexing its muscles in the pool at the Tokyo Olympics, especially Caleb Dressel. His dominant performance landing him 5 gold medals, including 2 more on the final day of swimming at these games.
Coy Wire is live from Tokyo for us. How do these guys celebrate? I mean, 5 gold medals, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, and this is years of training for this one moment. Christy, good to see you, and Boris. Caleb Dressel is certainly one who's been taking advantage of the moment. The reason he's been called the next Michael Phelps is because ever since the Rio Olympics, he's annihilated his competition at the Worlds and other major competitions. Now we've seen an Olympic legend blossom right before our eyes. Dressel, dominator, 50-meter freestyle. This is the event that crowns the fastest man in the pool on the planet. Caleb took the lead and then crushed it like Christy and Boris on a Sunday. He took gold with an Olympic record time of 21.07 seconds, and then he swam the butterfly leg, helping the 4x100 medley relay team win gold in a record time there. Dressel getting his 5th gold medal, 3 of them in individual events here in Tokyo. The only other swimmers to ever do that, Mark Spitz and Michael Phelps. Here he is.
I think the U.S. has been dominant for so many years, and for me to have my little stamp on the sport, of course it's special. I don't want to take anything away from Michael. I don't want to take anything away from Mark. Of course I'm happy with how I did here. It's not my goal to beat anybody in particular. It's about achieving what I feel like my potential is.
Dressel adding to his Olympic gold medal count in addition to the 2 he won in Rio. Right now, he's the gold standard of men's swimming. The GOAT of women's swimming, of course, Katie Ledecky. She brings 2 golds and 2 silvers back home, giving her a grand total of 10 Olympic medals in her career. I talked to Katie earlier today, fresh off yet another huge games, and she told me that it's still like a dream come true. Here she is.
It's an amazing feeling to be bringing home 2 golds and 2 silvers here and to have competed in my 3rd Olympics. It's something I never would have imagined when I first started swimming.
What do goats eat?
Healthy.
Yeah. But after years of sacrifice and discipline, a celebratory meal. And how are you just going to relax now that this is over?
Oh, I did have a hamburger after I was done. That tasted good. But yeah, I'm just going to enjoy spending time with my family and friends and telling them all the stories. I can't wait to get back to the U.S. and just give them a big hug.
Simone Biles has made an incredible impact on these games, and I think we're seeing how powerful mind is. There's not many people in the world who can say they've navigated what you have in your career. When you felt those sorts of moments, what got you through them? How did you navigate those situations?
I try to just stay focused on my own goals and try not to let external expectations get to me too much. Swimming is not the only thing that I enjoy doing. I'm passionate about other things as well, and so I'm really happy that I just finished my degree at Stanford and just had a great time there as well. So there's so much more to life than swimming and the Olympics, and the people around me remind me of that.
Congratulations, Katie Ledecky. She says she's not done, Boris and Christy. 2024, maybe 2028 Olympics as well still in her. Now, the athlete that everyone wanted to see here at the Games, Simone Biles has taken herself out of a 5th event here in Tokyo, the floor routine on Monday. This is in addition to the team final on today's individual vault and uneven bars events. Now, on Friday, Simone Biles revealed in now deleted post that she couldn't tell up from down in a practice session here in Tokyo. As she said that what was even scarier, she had no idea where she was in the air, and she had no idea how or where she was going to land. The 24-year-old said that when she's had the twisties, as she's called them in the past, it's taken 2 or more weeks for them to go away. Team USA official told me earlier that there's no deadline for Biles to pull out of the beam competition. We'll have to wait and see if we'll see her again on an Olympic stage. All right. The race to become the fastest woman in the world had some added drama even before Tokyo, with America's superstar Sha'Carri Richardson out serving a ban for marijuana. But in her absence, Jamaica making a huge statement in the 100-meter dash, finishing 1, 2, and 3, only furthering a long tail of dominance, defending Olympic champ Elaine Thompson-Herah, breaking Florence Griffith Joyner's Olympic record that stood for 33 years by 1/100th of a second. Shelly Ann Fraser-Price took the silver. She's a legend as well, 5-time Olympian who claimed gold in 2008 and 2012. Shericka Jackson took the bronze. But Boris and Christy, with Usain Bolt gone, I think Jamaica's still doing fine. The women, over the past 5 Olympic Games, have won 13 of the 15 available medals in the women's 100-meter dash. Unbelievable.
That reaction is worth seeing again.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just need to, she couldn't wrap her head around it. I'm sure that it's sinking in, and congratulations to all of them. Coy, always good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Coy.
You too. Thanks.
Sure. We know that it's been a week of confusion and a lot of frustration, right? The White House and the CDC, they're still updating guidelines. They're doing so amid these surging cases of the Delta variant now. From masks to the effectiveness of vaccines, we're talking about the government's messaging on the pandemic. That's next. "40 minutes past the hour, the Delta variant is tightening its grip on this country. It seems Americans, particularly those who are vaccinated, are looking for some more clarity on how to stay safe. The surge in cases, it forced the White House to shift to a more urgent tone. But when it comes to the actual messaging, that has not been clear.
Yeah, new Axios reporting says the Biden administration's handling of the Delta surge is leaving Americans confused and frustrated, and it is fueling media overreaction and political manipulation. Here to discuss that aspect is the anchor of reliable sources and CNN chief media correspondent Brian Stelter. Brian, good morning. Always great to see you.
Good morning.
Look, a lot of Americans are cynical about the government's COVID response. Some people feel misinformed, uninformed, and in the last 5 days, we've seen some reversals on guidance. Masks now are required again, even for vaccinated people. And the CDC is reporting that in some extremely rare cases, fully vaccinated people can spread the virus. Science is a process, right? And with this unprecedented virus, you can expect new data to change the approach. But at some point, people get worn out, not just with misinformation that's out there, but with legitimate messaging that is accurate but can appear contradictory, especially if it doesn't fit neatly into a headline.
Yes, because even accurate but cherry-picked data can be misleading. One of the key numbers this weekend is that 99.93% of fully vaccinated Americans have not tested positive for COVID. In other words, the vast majority of Americans who have been vaccinated have not become ill with this virus. And yet the numbers and the headlines in the last few days from outlets like the Washington Post and the New York Times have portrayed a situation that seems much more like a crisis for the vaccinated than it actually is. I could see this coming when the CDC indicated they were going to be issuing new guidance based on areas with high or substantial case counts. I logged onto the CDC website trying to figure out where my county stands in the data. And the website is so clunky, so poorly designed, so hard to find basic information. You could see there was a communications problem brewing, a disaster ahead. And I think really that's what this comes down to. The CDC has lots of information, lots of data, but it does not know how to present it well to the public. So it's really a communications and credibility crisis for the CDC. And one of the downstream effects is that sometimes the media coverage seems overwrought and sometimes hysterical, frankly.
Well, I almost wonder if part of the answer is just that the CDC sit down with somebody from the White House and they go over the information right before it's released, so there is a definitive, collective, unified message. And that messaging, I think, is what's been lost. And we know that the Biden administration official told CNN the media's coverage doesn't match the moment. The White House saying it's been hyperbolic and frankly irresponsible in a way that hardens vaccine hesitancy. And that the White House is concerned the media is too focused on these breakthrough infections. So the reports are they've reached out to some media outlets to dial back the coverage, right, Brian, and focus on the unvaccinated. Is that the right approach?
Right. They are privately and publicly saying the same thing, which is they think some of this coverage has been hyperbolic. But again, I would put that back on the CDC and on the government agencies. It is their job to communicate in a public health crisis and explain exactly what the new information indicates. And I think a lot of what's happened in the last few days is that there's a reluctance or a fear or an attempt not to try to shame or put too much pressure on the unvaccinated. And so there's this attempt to draw a very fine line, to walk a very fine tightrope, to put more pressure on the vaccinated to try to help the others who are not. There are those kinds of dynamics that are actually about psychology and sociology. And when you have these public health agencies and these elected officials trying to do politics in the midst of psychology and sociology, it doesn't always work out. But ultimately, it is on the media to get through this data, to try to be really clear in headlines about who is in danger and who is not in danger. And ultimately, for all of us to have to make our own risk choices, figure out our own risk tolerance, because that's what we're in now, the phase of the pandemic where we all have to make our own choices about risk. Yeah. But to do that, we need accurate data from the CDC. We need much better presentations from the White House, and we need news outlets to frame it carefully.
Yeah, it's the framing that's key, because with so much misinformation out there, the last thing you want is someone to misinterpret what is actually good news. And that is that, as you noted, these breakthrough cases happen in fewer than 0.1%. So the vaccines are extremely, extremely effective. Brian Stelter, thank you so much as always. And you can catch Brian later this morning on Reliable Sources. It starts at 11 a.m. Eastern right here on CNN. Up next, returning to work is only getting more complicated as the Delta variant spreads. It's even prompting confrontations between vaccinated and unvaccinated employees. Details after a quick break. Throughout the pandemic, working from home has made a huge difference for some families. For many, it's brought a better work-life balance, no traffic jams or long commutes to work.
Yeah, it also brought more flexibility when it came to childcare and chores. Now, some employers are urging, even demanding, that employees get back into the office. CNN's Christine Romans has more on these competing interests we're seeing now.
I'm producing more work. I can be held accountable virtually. I don't actually need to be physically in the office.
Some workers aren't ready yet to give up the flexibility and safety of working from home. But from the employer perspective, it's time.
If you can go to a restaurant in New York City, you can come into the office. And we want you in the office.
Offices for some Wall Street firms are already nearly full. Other industries preparing to return around Labor Day.
At its core, we perform best when people are in person, being human.
This exclusive work from home period may be coming to an end, whether employees like it or not.
Employers are saying the struggle with the narrative of this is good for me is that we pay you. So it has to be good for us. It must be mutually beneficial.
This tricky re-entry made more difficult by employees questioning the safety of the workplace amid surging cases of the Delta variant in the U.S.
We're creating this schism within the organization between vaccinated employees and unvaccinated employees. We've literally had reports of employees confronting unvaccinated employees and literally almost getting into physical fights.
A June survey showing 63% of workers support vaccine mandates at work.
Many employers are hearing from their workers, from their employees, that they want to know that people are vaccinated.
New York City employers are growing more confident workers will be in the office come September, from 45% in March to 62% in May. Willingness to return to the office, though, is uneven.
The young tech employees, it seems to be much tougher to get them back.
The balancing act also important for small businesses.
While there's concern about forcing people to come back or get vaccinated, there's also a lot of concern about the overall economy of the city. A big piece is the commuters working remotely, not patronizing the local stores.
Childcare is still a problem until it's clear that schools can reopen in person for good. Also a concern, the impact on careers of those who don't want to return to the office.
2, 3, 5 years from now, when they're making promotional decisions, we promote people who we know and with whom we've built relationships.
Christine Romans, CNN, New York.
Coming up, a blessing and a curse. Heavy rains are easing drought conditions out west finally, but there are some new concerns that come with that. Real concerns. We have all the latest next.